So in this chapter we are going to discuss about the forced unwrapping in Kotlin. So what is forced unwrapping in Kotlin? It is used when you are forcing the variable to contain any value and it should not contain null values. They play an important role while fetching the data from the web or from the different software. If you are doing some complex calculations on the same, and now suppose if that data is not fetched and if that data, there is no data in that, if that contains null, then what calculation will you do? So in that particular case it will throw an exception. So we'll see in the practicals. So just go into the IDE and let's do some coding. So in this case we had already seen that it contains null. Okay, null. And now just delete all this statement. Okay, delete this comment. Now the code looks pretty much cleaner and concise. Now suppose what you have written over there, var name string optional, that question mark is equal to null. That means it can contain null value. Okay, so rectify this one. It is name, not income. Now try to run this code. So what happens? It will simply print null, as we have seen already, null. So that means it can contain any value, some value, or null. Now it is of type string. So mention over here Scarlet. Okay, and print. Again rerun the code. This time I think it will print Scarlet. So you have seen it prints Scarlet. That means initially when we had assigned null value to this name variable, it was not printing anything, it was showing only null, and now we have assigned this Scarlet. So it is better to just do this on the very next line. Now suppose, okay, we have mentioned over here okay, so on the very first line what we had done, we have written name string of type optional. That means it can contain null or it can contain Scarlet. Okay, so just null. You can write the same statement on the very first line in one line, or you can split it into two lines to make it looks very little bit clearer. Okay, so now what happens? So this name is null, and when you are printing this name variable, now if you force this variable to contain some value, so what we had discussed in the forced unwrapping presentation, that you have to include two exclamation signs after the variable. Okay, so if you run this code, you can see it throws an exception. So what we had discussed, so if you are forcing any variable, that means you are doing the forced unwrapping, and if that variable doesn't contain any value that contains null, that in that particular case it will throw an exception. So you can see here on the console that it's showing an exception in thread main kotlin.kotlin null pointer exception. Okay, now suppose if you assign some value same as Scarlet. Okay, so now this variable contains or holds this particular string Scarlet, and now if you are doing forced unwrapping, so see whether it throws an exception or not. I think it will not, because now this variable contains the value. You can see over there, it contains the value string. So you can see that force unwrapping is very valuable while fetching the data from some source, and if you are doing some complex calculation or doing some important thing based on that particular value, and if that particular value is null, your calculation is going to be hung, and if that is going to be hung or stuck, you need to throw an exception. So in that particular case, this forced unwrapping comes into picture, and it plays a vital role over there. So you can try this out on a system and explore as much as possible. We'll look into this in the later chapters in a very detailed manner, and we'll get to know about the usage of the same while doing the project. As of now, this is done.